Why was this such an important tool in 2008, 9, and 10? And will be again maybe in the next couple of years. I'll give you a hint. Why was this such an important tool to a tenant rep broker in 2009, 10, and even first half of 11? Yeah, Bobby?
They're paying over market and the market changed. You could go look at the lease.
This was the blend and extend tool. You'd read this and you'd see, whoa! These cats have 2 years remaining on their lease, and they're 45% over market. This is the easiest call I'm going to make. The call you did not make in 2009 is, would you like to expand with your lease coming up in 2 years? The call was this: Frank, do you have any interest in reducing your present cost of occupancy? And you would yell over the phone. Well, I didn't even need the phone to hear your answer. What was your answer? Yeah. No, it wasn't yeah. What was it?
Oh, yeah.
Hell yes! When can you come over? You reduce my cost of occupancy. We've been doing it all day long. You're in a perfect situation. Let me come visit with you. That was the call, right? And they'd go over there and they'd do a blend and extend. The real difference by the ones we trained, many tenant reps that did blend and extends only got paid on the extend because that was only a new term they created. But those that we've trained, God bless you, those that we trained clearly understood you get paid a commission on the extend from the landlord, but you get a consulting fee from the tenant on the blend. Because if I've saved you hundreds of thousands of dollars over 24 months, I got to get paid something. What is interesting though, and I was just in Los Angeles, and maybe it's happening in other markets too, and we're still in a very strong market, on many of the blend and extends, the tenant rep's getting paid on the whole new deal. They're not getting paid on the new term. So I know you're shaking your head. No, I said LA. I didn't say Orlando, right? What city did I say?
LA.
You're where?
Orlando.
Okay. So I said, I don't know what's happening in other cities. So in some cities, which surprises me too, because if I was a landlord, I'd say, listen, they owe me for 2 years and I'm changing my rent. Now maybe if they got a little bump, because we have been seeing reverse blend and extends, which we started seeing probably about 3 years ago. What do you think a reverse blend and extend is? This is for the tenant who wants to stay but wants to hedge and is concerned about where that rent's going to be in 2 years because it keeps escalating. And they're saying, I'll go in now and extend and just protect, and not get killed in 2 years. And so now we've been seeing, all sorts of varieties of blend and extend. So maybe it's in those cases that they've been getting the full commission. But this is a fabulous tool in all cases, but particularly, for the blend and extend business. But here's what I want to get into. This has been one of my favorite websites for decades, bizminer.com. It is run by a neat guy in Ohio by the name of John. We talk to John all the time. And he's running, I guess, a small little neat business. And I get this question all the time, Mike, where else have you been able to find the data? I said, I've not been able to find a place. John publishes what we call the I-RRR. Do not confuse it with internal rate of return. Every tenant has an SIC code, which is now known as an NAICS, North American Industrial Classification. The Lipsy Company is 531390. We're real estate consultants. That's our classification. This is exactly what we are. Everyone is something. And everyone's got to put that on their tax return. So we're real estate consultants. And what John has done is he has found out for anyone that's a 531390 or any other NAICS, he has found out what their I-RRR is. For this particular group, which I think are lawyers, although this is, what is this? Lawyers or professional scientific technical services. In 2017, no matter what kind of company you were, SC, partnership, everyone that was in the Philadelphia area paid 5.67% of their revenue to base rent. That's I-RRR. And after these many years, I'm amazed at the number of tenant rep brokers that have never heard of I-RRR. It's like having a Ferrari but not having the key. It's the key to the whole operation. You're going to win more tenant rep assignments by being able to counsel your tenant on here's what your peer group is paying rent to revenue. Those of you that are in commercial real estate, you have no idea what the I-RRR is for commercial real estate brokers, do you? It's around 5.5% to 6% is what we pay of our revenue. And y'all are in the business and don't know. So I can tell you almost every single tenant is clueless. But watch what I can do with this number. I take the 5.67, stay with me on this, and I'm able to build a little model like this. Now, for this tenant, the I-RRR for this peer group was 4.2. They want to do a new lease in 2020. And as I mentioned to you yesterday, in every presentation you make, you've got to bring in 5 high hurdles, right? High hurdle 1, we want this assignment. We want the right to represent you, but no matter who you hire, and we hope it's us, please make sure your tenant rep broker gives you advice on the right amount of base rent to put on your P&L. We're in one of the strongest, priciest markets we've seen in a long time, and the one thing we do not want you to do is to do a lease that causes harm to your P&L. We understand what your revenue is going to be, and we're glad you gave us a conservative top-line number. Your peer group is paying 4.2% of their top to base rent. Our counsel to you, if we find the right building in the right submarket, is we want you to have something around $210,000 in base rent for next year. And then based upon your forecast of your growth rate, 210, 226 is the kind of lease we want to make sure we negotiate for you. It is amazing the number of tenant rep brokers right now that are negotiating leases for their tenants, that the rent is growing faster in proportion to the top line. Because the landlords are able to get all kinds of escalations and they get the bumps, right? And they're getting all this stuff. And the tenant rep, and even worse, the tenant is not aware. They've just kind of negotiated a negatively advertising mortgage because the pass-throughs, the escalations are moving at a faster pace than the increase in my revenue. So maybe you were kind of close to what you should be paying in the first year, but the escalations were increasing faster proportionally than the top line. It is, and that's not an obscure result, that is a frequent result. That's why you get the call from the tenant after 3 or 4 years and say, we want to give some space back. They don't want to give space back. They can't afford the space they have because the rent's growing so fast, but no one ever put up the yellow light and said, well, just so you know, you can be paying 4% of your top line, but you've got a slow growth top. You'll be paying 6 in 3 years. Just one. So you got to start jettisoning some stuff off your P&L. Just give it some thought. No one ever has that conversation, right? Y'all getting the sense I'm getting ready to get crazy wound up? Who's going to say, I think that Lipsy is about ready to come undone? Because this doesn't drive me a little crazy. This drives me real crazy. That they're out there showing buildings in their BMW, and they do not realize what they've done. And here's what's even cooler. The tenant doesn't realize the harm that the tenant rep has done. They never call the tenant rep and said, did you know you inadvertently put me into a lease that my total cost of occupancy is growing at a faster pace than my top line in proportion? Because I've been looking at the percentage of my P&L that was 4.5 and 4.9 and 5.2. They never have that conversation. And the tenant rep would have some kind of wonderful response that only a tenant rep could come up with.
It was Monday work. So how do you fight that in a 2% vacancy market when other tenants are taking the space and maybe 1 or 2 options to go?
I don't fight it. I just counsel them. There's no fight, but my job is to at least make them aware. Taylor, you're about ready to do a deal that's going to get real expensive. You better pray every night there's no recession, because what's going to happen is 2009, where your cost of occupancy is going to do this and your revenue is going to do that, and it's going to accelerate. So now what's going to happen, the percentage of revenue is going to accelerate faster during a recession. There was no back door that was negotiated, no right to terminate, no right to, you're really stuck then. But that's the good news for the tenant rep. They can play it both ways. They now are in the blend and extend business, because every single landlord that I know is delighted to extend the lease in a recession, reduce the rent for a couple of years, not to harm the rent roll. And matter of fact, there's no more win-win situation on the planet than a blend and extend environment. The tenant rep wants the money, the tenant wants less rent, and the landlord wants more term. It's the easiest negotiation going. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We have a wonderful read, Mid-Atlantic, that called us and said, Mike, we're doing all kinds of blend and extends years ago, but we think we're reducing the rent too much because we're blending it down to the market. I said, you are. I'm going to give you the exact same tool I give the tenant reps. The tenant might be able to pay more. Less than what they're paying, but more than where the market is depressed to. Y'all with me? So this same tool we give to everybody. Can you imagine you're in a tenant rep presentation? We want to represent you. But no matter who you hire, please make sure they've given you a forecast of good health. And in the event, to get to your question, we can't get you 210, 226, do some soul searching. You love the location. If it dramatically helps you recruit, retain, and improve your productivity, well, then maybe there's some justification that you should be out of budget. But at least you now know what the budget is. The single biggest mistake that tenant reps make is negotiating a market lease and advising a tenant to take it because it's the best deal. It is the best market deal, but you might not be able to afford it. But the reason they don't know is they never had guidance. Can you imagine the tenant rep is not providing guidance? I'm working with a tenant rep in Baltimore. Tenant was interviewing 3 firms. They had a similar question for all 3 firms. We want to do at least 8 to 10 years, but we want you to counsel us on how much rent we should be paying each year. I'm amazed that that question isn't asked every single time. Now, if you've got a corporate real estate department, they know, right? They know. But a business that has no real estate department that does a deal every 8 to 10 years, they maybe have a chief financial officer that knows very little about real estate, they want some guidance. Questions? Come on.
This information, does it apply to every category, restaurant?
Every NAICS, and as I'd mentioned to Jim, I was on the team that developed the CLS designation, or whatever ICS calls it, when we used to do it years ago at Michigan State, at Kellogg, all right? And since the beginning of time, there's been dollars and cents where everybody knows if you want this location, you pay 6% of your revenue. Everything's a function of sales, right? In retail. Has been for a long time. Office industrial, whatever the market wants, that's what you pay. They ain't a retailer, with exception, that's going to say, I'll pay what the landlord wants. They pay, it's a function of sales.
Are they still doing dollars and cents? Because I haven't seen it.
Ask Jim.
Yeah, I think ULI, this ULI product, ICSC does not. Okay. So
But there's the guidance been around since the beginning of time, which I know is published by somebody. Big box, 1.5 point, jewelry stores, 8. You know, they know, and they run the numbers and the cost of goods, and that's my rent. So you jump up and down all you want. That's what I'm paying you. Office and industrial. Oh, that's what you want. Okay. Tenant rep says it's a good deal. There's a Starbucks on the ground floor, right? I mean, I've always thought for years, why don't office and industrial tenants think like retail tenants? I am going to fix my cost of occupancy as a percentage of my revenue, and not what the landlord wants me to pay, but what I should be paying, because I want to be able to compete fairly with my peer group. IRM is probably the best place to get expenses. And I've been a CPM up until recently for 40 years. And they have what's called the income and expense analysis report, where they've got every property type. But you've got to determine what the other expenses are going to be. And this is a fabulous resource, because I now need to get to something besides I-RRR. I now need to get to dollars to occupier ratio. And that's a function of 3 ingredients. The I-RRR is published at BizMiner. Other expenses based upon the submarket is published at IRM. The expenses in Newport Beach are different than the expenses in Beverly Hills, and I need to take a look, right? And it's all there. The third item is not published. It comes from the broker. It is, what is the leverage that we have or don't have in the upcoming negotiation with the landlord? To me, equilibrium is around 92 to 93%. If a good tenant rep faces off against a good agency broker and the market's at 92, 93, and there's 3 or 4 different choices, I think we're going to have a fun, fair knife fight. If we get into a marketplace at 16, 17% vacant, the tenant rep is going to be a nasty broker. Matter of fact, the best tenant reps, when you're 16% vacant, the best way to negotiate a lease is don't ever return the call of the landlord. You show the space and it goes like this. It's 16% vacant, no action in the market, but you've got a real viable tenant. You show the space, you show, yeah, we might be interested, get me a proposal. But you don't return the call of the landlord because it goes like this. The landlord calls, or the landlord rep calls the tenant rep and says, Trey, man, yeah, we got you the proposal last week. We'd love to have your tenants. I'm thinking we'll give you another month free rent. A couple days, don't call back. Landlord calls you again and says, Trey, I know you haven't returned my call. We've been looking at your deal, and we're going to give you 2 more reserved parking spaces. You follow what I'm saying? Yeah. And so the tenant rep that has a little mercy that they'll show, when it sounds like the guy's almost in tears, is when they finally return the call and say, okay, we'll take it. You don't have to say anything as a tenant rep when you're 16% vacant. Just don't return the phone call. I mean, you're in no hurry. So now we get to the dollars to occupy ratio. The highest that we've ever seen is 2.5. The lowest we've ever seen is 2.5. Las Vegas, 2009. I get a flyer. Gorgeous brand new property right next to McCarran. 3-year lease. We'll move you and do turnkey on the build out, and the first year inside the 3 is free. That's a minus 2.5. All right? That's on the flyer. That's not in the negotiation. That's on the flyer. San Francisco. They tell me they could lease the sidewalks if the city would let them. That's a plus 2.5, right? I mean, that is on the other extreme, and that's kind of where we go. So now what we do is we take these 3 ingredients and we get to our dollars to occupy ratio. I-RRR published at BizMiner is 5, other expenses is going to be 2 because it's an expensive sub-market. Landlord's able to get a lot of expenses through, and not only that, it's only about 3% vacant. There's not a lot of selection. Landlord's going to have the leverage in the negotiation. I've got a dollars to occupy ratio of 9. And now guess what I can do? Now I can build a tool that gives my client a budget or context of what these proposals mean. But what most tenant reps do is they do not provide this section. They just go out and get the 3 proposals. They compare one proposal to the other, right? And then they might make counsel based upon which one is the most attractive proposal. But there's only one small problem with that. I have nothing to compare it to. I get a physical every year. The guy I've been seeing for 30 years tells me my cholesterol needs to be less than 200. I was an awful biology and science student, but I get that. Less than 200 is good. More than 200 is bad. So I get my blood work several years ago, and it's 205, and then 211, and 215. You don't have to have a degree in biology to understand, I think I'm moving in the wrong way. He says, Mike, he says, I'm going to put you on a little statin, take it for 30 days, and I want you to go get your blood work. So I take this little statin for 30 days, and he calls me and says, Mike, I just got your blood work back, 187. I don't know what makes up the 187, but I do know that 187 is less than what? That's all I need to know. That's what the tenant wants to know. What's good health financially for my P&L? And let me make the business decision. If I fall in love with 3344 and they want $525,000, at least I know I'm $75,000 over plan. But maybe I'll be able to justify it. I'm cool with that. There's times that they easily justify. It's next to our most important customers. It'll be a great place to recruit. They've got on-site dining. It's got a wonderful health club. I don't mind paying that much more for those benefits. But at least they know what they're paying for the benefits. But if they don't have this first section, they're paying market rent. It has no context. I've seen tenants hire tenant reps on the spot when they see this. They said, you're the first tenant rep to come in here and advise me relative to my peer group for the sub-market that we want, what we should be paying. I guess they're also wondering, why haven't the other firms done the same thing? That's what I would be thinking. All right, questions. Because sometimes I get so carried away, I just don't. Yes?
I didn't understand how you got to 9.
All right, let me go back.
Where the number came from.
So the question is, where did the 9 come from? You know where the 5 came from? Where? BizMiner. It's published. And BizMiner publishes the national for every NAICS, and they publish it for every market that's probably over 80,000. So if you want to know Lake Mary, Altamont Springs, what lawyers are paying in Altamont Springs are different than what they're paying in downtown Orlando. So he breaks it down by market. It's published. And you know where he gets his information from? Where do you think he's getting it from? Tax returns. No, not census, tax returns. Every person that is a commercial real estate broker files a tax return. They've got a standardized NAICS, S Corp, C Corp, partnership, whatever they are. But they all have the same consistent NAICS, right? He takes all that, how he does it, their income, and he does all of the expenses, not just rent, but employees and benefits and all that stuff. The 2 comes from IRM. What are the operating expenses compared to the CBD to Maitland Lake Mary? All right? So they would do that for you. Cool? And the 2 comes from who? The market's 3%. Landlords are being tough, tough, tough. Almost every landlord in that submarket has a strong balance sheet. They're not giving anything away. Who has the leverage in the negotiation? And matter of fact, there's only 2 vacancies that would accommodate your tenant. 15% vacant, 8 options. Landlords have been calling you every day, bring by your tenant. Who's got the leverage? We now probably have gone less than 0 and moved into minus territory. Tenant rep has the leverage.
What's the range?
Minus 2.5 to plus 2.5 would be the range I would give you. Let's have some fun. Write this down. You're making a tenant rep presentation, and the tenant says, would you counsel me on how much base rent that I should be paying for my 3-year lease? And you said, I'd be glad to. Let me ask you a couple questions. They say, shoot, what do you think you'll do next year? They'll say, I think we'll do about $2 million. And what do you think will be your growth top line? Well, I think we'll do $2 million next year, then we'll do $2 million too, and then to be safe, which we want you to be, we'll do $2 million for. So let me go back to my office and do some homework, and then I'll come back tomorrow morning and I'll give you a forecast of the right amount of base rent to put on your P&L. And you go back and you look at their NAICS, and you find out that this peer group in your city is paying 5.5% of their revenue to base rent. I now want you to do a forecast of the right amount of base rent that I should budget for 2020, 21, and 22. You got it? So I'm 2, 2, 2, 2, 4. I'm a 5, I-RRR. What is your counsel on the right amount of base rent that I should budget? I might not end up negotiating a lease. All right, now y'all ready for this? Watch this. Kevin, I understand you want to represent me. I'm a tenant. But the question I have, in a new lease that I do, how much base rent should I be budgeting so it does no harm to my P&L? What would your advice be?
Year 1, 110, year...
Wait, so come on, sell it a little bit. You don't know. You don't just give them the answer. Just say, Mike, I'm glad you asked that question, because anyone that you hire should be prepared to answer that. And so we've done an extensive amount of research on what your peer group would be paying, right? You got to give them a little bit of that. And so through our in-depth research, now go. Our advice to you is you should be around what next year?
110,000.
And then that way we would make sure that we've done no harm to your P&L based upon a conservative forecast of top line. And then the next year?
121.
And then the third year?
132.
How long did it take you to do that?
35 seconds.
You're talking about winning a bunch of tenant rep assignments when you can do this. Because you know what? It's what they want. They want someone not just to put them in their clean car and show them vacant space. I can go to the Smithsonian and get that person. They want someone that can counsel them on what are the economics that I should be paying. Now we take the 9, and you can see where the math comes from. We multiply the I-RRR times 5 million to get the 210. But to get to 450, we had an I-RRR, I think, of 9. And so now we go out and get proposals. And understand these proposals are all over the place. Some got free rent in year 3, some have more TI, some have more escalations. But guess what we do? We present value this using their discount rate. We divide it by the lease term, and for office, we divide it by the usable square footage, because in my mind, rentable is really not, everyone calculates rentable different. Everyone says they use BOMA, but the fact of the matter is they don't. They come up with whatever works, right? And so we tend to use usable because we know the space that they're using. And so what we do is we take the space that is recommended by the space planner or the programmer, and we divide, this math by the usable square footage they should have, and then this becomes what we call target. And then we get what they actually want, what they actually want, what they actually want, and then in a heartbeat, the tenant can see, yeah, I'm in line, or I'm way out, or whatever it might be. This is one of the most powerful. Matter of fact, if you said, Mike, I need one slide to win more tenant rep assignments, it's this slide right here. Because the highest hurdle is no matter who you hire, make sure you don't have a broker that just shows you 3 buildings and negotiates a market lease for you. Make sure they understand by having done a thorough needs analysis with you first, understanding your business, your industry, and put together a plan that does no harm to your business, that is mindful of negotiating a lease that conforms to your business. Then they go out and get. Because from a negotiating standpoint, when you say, let's say 3344 wants 550, you can legitimately say, my tenant cannot pay that much. They just can't. It's the way Jim would negotiate a retail lease. They don't pay 9%, they pay 6%, or however you guys do it in retail. But you should be doing the same thing in office and industrial. They cannot pay that much rent for the revenue they're going to generate from that location. Why we don't think that way is just crazy. That's what the landlord wants, so I guess that's what I have to pay.